All right, guys, hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm going to go over a couple things, and this is just a really easy form, but I want to make sure that I go over it, making sure my sound's on here, because it's a form that you're going to come across, no doubt, especially if you're doing older properties. So let's just pull up. I've got my templates here, so I'm going to fill out a blank one. And we're going to see that there is the addendum regarding lead-based paint, and then there's also addendum for seller's disclosure of information on lead-based paint. So let's go there. Okay, so this is the form that the sellers should be sending you, and by sellers I mean seller's agent. So if you're a buyer's agent, you came here to do research on this specific form, remember that the seller's agents are going to be sending you this as an addendum to the seller's disclosure. Okay, so of course, obviously this is for every property that is prior to 1978. So if you have a property that's older than 1978, then you're going to automatically know that you're going to need to send this form, if you're the listing agent, to the buyer's agent. So this is the seller's disclosure of the presence of lead-based paint. So they either have or know that there's lead-based paint there, or they're unaware. You're typically going to see them check off they have no actual knowledge of lead-based paint, so they'll check here. And then down here, records and reports available to seller. If they have reports, they're going to check that off. But typically, you're just going to see that there's not any reports available. Okay. Here's where it gets really, really interesting. So when I teach my real estate classes, I kind of used to poke fun at this, which was not the right mentality. Hindsight's always 20/20, but this was several years ago, so I can say that I used to kind of make fun of the form a little bit, not make fun of it, but make light of it. And by saying, well, unless you're eating paint chips or something, let's not worry too much about the lead-based paint because of blah, 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 blah. And that was absolutely the wrong mentality, because not only is this a form that is required by federal law, there are properties that are built before 1978, obviously, that do have the presence of lead-based paint. And so if you're in there and if you have children and you're renovating a property, they could possibly be exposed to the lead-based paint. So it is something we want to take serious, and we want to make sure that we don't have any liability coming back on us later on down the road. So if you're a buyer's agent, you're looking for this to be filled out by the seller. And of course, this part's going to be blank. So you're going to send your buyer the lead-based paint pamphlet, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. It's called the Protect Your Family from Lead in the Home. And you're actually going to check off that they've received copies of that. So let's go to paragraph C first. It says buyer's rights. It's either buyer waives the opportunity to conduct a risk assessment or inspection of the property for the presence of lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards, or within 10 days after the effective date of this contract, buyer may have the property inspected by inspectors selected by buyer. If lead-based paint or lead-based paint hazards are present, buyer may terminate this contract by giving the seller written notice within 14 days after the effective date of this contract, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. So obviously, if that's something that the buyer selects to do, they can check off either one or two. And then they're just going to check off if they've received the copies of all the information listed above, I suppose if there was lead-based paint in the property, and then that they've received the pamphlet. So we're going to check off all of these. Of course, this is an if, right? If there's actual lead-based paint in the property or knowledge of that lead-based paint on number one, but we're going to check off number two because we're going to have given them that pamphlet. And then on here, you're typically going to check off that they're waiving the opportunity to conduct that risk assessment. Now, what I always do is make sure that I explain to the buyers that if they are concerned about this and there is a concern then they do have that capability to get the property inspected for lead-based paint. So we never want to tell them to not worry about it, only if they're eating the paint chips or something like that. We don't want to diminish the form. We want to make sure that we acknowledge that it is serious, but also we don't want to scare a potential buyer on a situation that's not a real issue. So if there's not any issues with lead-based paint, we obviously don't want to scare our clients, but we just want to make sure it's more of a disclosure, right? And that's what the form is for. So real simple form, but lots of liability there. So once this is filled out correctly, you're now going to go back, which I'm going to go back here, and make sure obviously that you've submitted the pamphlet to your buyer client. And let's go ahead and show you what that looks like. And there's even another form in here, TXR 2510, steps to lead safe renovation, repair, and painting. So that's kind of cool too. I mean, if you just have somebody that's really concerned about this, obviously send them that information, and more information is going to be useful to them, especially if they're worried about the presence of lead-based paint in the home. And it does happen, folks. I haven't have it happen to me, but I've had other agents in our firm that the buyers were very concerned about that, and so they wanted to get the home checked for lead-based paint. And so it can possibly happen. But anyways, here is the Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home pamphlet. So you're going to want to send this to them and make sure that they are have read this and that they're okay with the information in here. And of course, if they have further questions and stuff like that, they're more than welcome to get that risk assessment performed, or that lead-based paint inspection. All right, so that's it, and hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Again, really simple form, but we don't want to get in any liability or diminish the importance of any of these forms, and so that's why it's important to get that form filled out correctly, and making sure that you're asking the seller for a copy of that form if the property is built before 1978. All right, guys, hopefully that was helpful to you.